Hi again. I am Madison, and today I am going to be talking to you guys about the last Yellowstone explosion. Most of you probably know about the Yellowstone National Park, and for those of you that don't, Yellowstone was actually the first national park created, and it is located in Wyoming. Yellowstone, I think personally, is best known for being the location of the Old Faithful geyser. At least that's why I went there as a kid, and I think that's why most tourists go there as well. So, the Old Faithful geyser is actually the biggest, most regularly occurring geyser, which makes it studied by researchers fairly often. So this geyser is a result of Yellowstone being on top of one gigantic, humongous supervolcano. So all of Yellowstone makes up the world's biggest active volcano, and it's believed that magma is only 5 to 10 miles below the surface, which is the reason for all of the geysers and hot springs in this national park. So the volcanic region under Yellowstone was created when a period of volcanic activity occurred in what is now present-day Nevada, Oregon, and Idaho. So this volcanic activity was a 500-mile long trail that was created when the North American plate traveled over a shallow body of magma. So this North American plate then continued to move and eventually is now where we think of it today as the Yellowstone National Park. And it got into this area about 2.1 million years ago. So this volcano in this region also attributes to 1,000 to 3,000 earthquakes a year, which is an insane amount. Most of these are not fatal or huge, but some of them are, as I think one of them killed around like 28 people, although I don't think any of them died from the earthquake itself. I think they died from like landslides and the aftermath of these earthquakes. So Yellowstone has had volcanic eruptions over the past 2.1 million years, but only 3 of them have been major. And when Yellowstone has major eruptions, they are extremely major eruptions. You do not want to be anywhere near it. So these huge explosions occurred 2.1 million years ago, 1.2 million years ago, and then the most recent one, which I will be talking about a lot, occurred 640,000 years ago. So since this last main explosion, there have also been several smaller explosions. There have been actually about 80 non-violent explosions, and about half of them have all had lava flows. Half of those 80 have had lava flows. And this info is all according to the United States Geological Survey. So during this last eruption, the one that was 64,000 years ago, a giant crater was formed, and these craters are also known as calderas. So this one specifically that was formed was called the Yellowstone caldera, and it was massive and totaled 1,500 square miles. Other calderas have also been created by the previous eruptions as well. This one was just the most recent. So these calderas are formed when copious amounts of magma are spewed from the surface and then mixed with gas and spread in every possible direction. Then they quickly retreat and they cause the ground to collapse under them. So that's how the last Yellowstone caldera was formed. And just to put things in perspective for you, the total amount of lava outputted just by the 3 major explosions was enough to completely fill the Grand Canyon. So this explosion outputted a whole lot of force, a whole lot of magma, and a whole lot of destructive power. Scientists also estimate that the ash from this previous explosion covered most of all of the western United States. So this ash would have been extremely deep, would have been over a foot tall as far out as 200 miles away from Yellowstone. And then on top of all of that, the wind would have carried the ash particles and sulfur into the atmosphere and spreading it around the world from continent to continent. So then these other continents would have also felt the effects by the air being polluted as well. Also, this large amount of ash and sulfur would have blocked out the sun, causing the earth to go into a rapid cool, and then even in some cases start the earth in a direction of an ice age. There is evidence of ash from this last volcanic eruption still in Yellowstone and in other faraway places such as Louisiana, Iowa, and there's still even some in California. Other ways that scientists know about this explosion and can date it is by studying the Yellowstone Lake. The Yellowstone Lake is in the Yellowstone caldera, which was created in this last explosion. So scientists are able to map the history of the explosion from that lake, as lava has been flowing up from the bottom of the lake for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so when the lava flows up from the bottom of the lake, then it hardens and turns kind of into a rockish thing, which allows scientists to tell how old the caldera is. And then as the caldera was created by the last massive eruption, then they can tell when that eruption happened. These rocks also are able to tell them what the chemicals are that were in that water, in that area at the time, so they can tell the sulfuric acid content and stuff to see when the eruption occurred. So Lisa Morgan is one scientist who regularly studies the Yellowstone Lake. She also studies craters inside and outside the lake as well to help date this time. So she dates these craters that are around this area by using radiocarbon dating. So she uses radiocarbon dating for wood that are debris fragments from the explosions. So she can date and determine the time when these were shot out, and then that way she can also kind of determine the distance and how powerful the explosion was as well. Other ways to study when this explosion happened would be by studying the sediment at the bottom of the lake. You could see the contents of the sediment, and there are also ash deposits. These ash deposits can be anywhere from in Yellowstone to, let's say, California as earlier, as where the ash traveled. Other biologists would also be able to tell when this explosion happened by looking at the pollen content in the sediment and the dirt around this area. So if the pollen content was high, then that would show that there was a lot of life and it was abundant, and then there was a sudden pollen drop-off, and then that would show that there was a traumatic event that happened that caused a whole lot of life to die, and the area is kind of void of life, or there's not nearly as much in it anymore. Another way to date and find more about this last explosion are called tuffs. So tuffs are rock that is made of volcanic ash that is then compacted over time. So there are 3 different tuffs that are associated with each of the gigantic volcanic explosions from Yellowstone. The first being the Huckleberry Ridge tuff, then the Mesa Fall tuff, and then the Lava Creek tuff. And the Lava Creek tuff is the one that was formed from the explosion 640,000 years ago. So then these just prove the massive explosions of Yellowstone and help scientists to study them. So in the Lava Creek tuff, there are ring fractures that show the explosion from a while ago. So ash would have flowed and hardened from the previous explosions, creating a rock-like substance. And then when the most recent explosion happened, the pressure would have built up, and magma and lava would have spewed from the surface and cracking the rock and bursting outwards. So then ash and lava would have been spread everywhere. Then the ash would have been settled and then compressed over it under its own weight and cooled rapidly. So then current scientists can then study these deposits of the ash from the explosion and the rock and like how it was cracked in order to understand the explosion and the date and the power of the explosion. So there's even a more surprising way to find evidence of huge volcanic eruptions. Well, at least I think it's more surprising because it is by ice. So by digging into ice, scientists are able to determine the ice's chemical composition. So there were chunks of ice that were found to have an extremely high sulfuric acid content, which shows an explosion or something like a volcanic eruption and is unusual. Seeing a sulfuric acid can be toxic and lethal. So billions of tons of sulfuric acid was shot into the Earth's atmosphere during this last explosion, and it settled down, some being frozen in the ice where the scientists could see. So then scientists also compared this, the date of this sulfuric acid in the ice to the ratios in oxygen found in the ocean at this time. So scientists are able to see the oxygen content by studying the shells of small sea creatures. And then the higher the oxygen content, that usually means the cooler the water was. So during the same time of the high sulfuric acid concentration, there was a high oxygen concentration, which then proved that there was all the sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, which then again blocked out the sun and caused rapid cooling of the earth. And then also, volcanic ash can be traced back to its origin. So all volcanic ash has its own unique signature. So by tracing where this ash is located and how much of it there is, scientists are able to see the force of this explosion and how much it covered and where it originally located from. So in conclusion, while an eruption of Yellowstone in our lifetime is not likely, even though it's overdate to erupt, when it does happen, it causes water pollution, it's going to cause crops to die, machinery will be more than likely clogged due to the ash, and then people and animals will die, if not from asphyxiation, and probably some from starvation as well. So I certainly don't want to be around when that happens, and I don't think that you do either. I hope that you have learned a lot about Yellowstone in the last Yellowstone explosion, and how we know about it. So just to recap everything, the most recent Yellowstone explosion occurred 640,000 years ago. There have only been 3 of these major explosions. Scientists are able to determine that this explosion happened because the Yellowstone caldera was formed, and they can date that as well. And then also there are ash sediments found in other places, and then the oxygen levels, pollen content, and just by looking in the sediment as well. So this explosion was massive, and then it blocked out the sun and caused the earth to rapidly cool, and killed a lot of the environment. So that's pretty much all you need to know about the last Yellowstone explosion, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks.